All right, peace and blessings, everybody. It's November the 28th, the year 2017, Tuesday. Got several prisoner letters in our P.O. box today. One of them was from Daniel Riley. We love Daniel Riley. We care a great deal about him. We are looking forward to the DiMaia decision at the Supreme Court level. If Neil Gorsuch goes in the right direction with his decision, Daniel Riley could get out of prison. He's been in prison over 10 years already. He still has, I think, I forget when his release date is, but I think it's another 20 years or 17 years, something like that. In any event, he writes a personal letter, which I will not read, but I'll just cover some highlights. He indicated that the name of this letter that I'm about to read, and you can also download this on yearofjubilee.com. Go to the Ed and Elaine Brown page. There is a section called Daniel Riley's Patriot Letters 2 of 2, and this one is titled Daniel Riley, April the 16th, 2012, Inflation. And the title that Daniel wanted me to give it is Inflation is the Enemy's Weapon of Choice. So he's going to be writing about inflation today. He said that he wrote it to a patriot named Texas Terry, but Texas Terry has since disappeared or, no longer communicating with Daniel. So if Texas Terry, if you're out there, we would love to remake contact with you and put you in touch with Daniel. He also says that Dr. Manning's staff wants to send him a care package, but that the enemy does not allow such things. So he'll have to write Dr. Manning back and tell him that he's not able to receive care packages from Dr. Manning's ministry, which we appreciate. Dr. Manning, can't say enough wonderful things about the courage of that man. He talks about Mrs. B, how Mrs. B has been a blessing. He said one of the books that was on his list, called The Panic of 1819, Reactions and Policies of Murray N. Rothbard, was purchased for him. So he said to go ahead and take that off the list, which I did. So that's no longer on the list, so people don't buy it twice. He said that Pat Shannon sent him the book on the two Oswalds, and he's currently reading the book about Tupper Saucy. So that came from Will Cullum and Pat Shannon. We're grateful that they sent him the books that they did. He also discusses a little bit of his family history and ancestry, about his Irish bloodline and his some of his ancestors' names and how they were incredibly wealthy in his ancestry. And he also just overflows with gratitude towards everyone that's helping him. Daniel Riley is a real gentleman. He's very grateful for anyone who reaches out to him, and I think he's worth our time. And we pray that he is blessed and comforted during this Christmas holiday season, when you know that it's hard on all these prisoners to be separated from their family. All right, this is the letter to Texas Terry. It's dated April the 16th of 2012. I am obliged to start this correspondence with an expression of my gratitude for your hardihood in coming forward with the truth, so justice at least has a chance to prevail. I know the anxiety that the enemy's wicked ways play on a candid mind, such as you maintain. Therefore, I thank you for having the mettle to do the right thing, simply because it is right. I have since learned that since Daniel Riley has written this letter, that the lawyers, the attorneys for Texas Terry, advised him not to testify in defense of Daniel, and he didn't. There's a word for that. You can look it up on the internet. It's called Pusillanimous, Pusillanimous, Pusillanimous. But, Texas Terry, if you're out there and you have your side of the story, I would love to hear from you. But my understanding is your attorneys told you not to testify on behalf of Daniel Riley, and you didn't. Okay, Daniel Riley goes on to write, keep in mind this letter is over 5 years old. Having no faith at all in the courts, through first-hand experience, I know the odds are not in my favor to obtain relief from the unjust circumstances I am suffering. I am currently waiting on the enemy's response to the habeas corpus petition I submitted, which is due next week. But I expect an extension for time to be granted to the enemy, probably another 60 days. I also have submitted other affidavits of witnesses who were also denied an unfettered decision whether to testify or not by the enemy's threatening and intimidating actions. Furthermore, the trial attorney who assisted me has submitted an affidavit stating he did no preparation for trial. My most substantial claim, besides the enemy stealing the evidence I personally obtained, threatening my witnesses, and refusal of the court to issue me any subpoenas, is the fact that the court disallowed my 100% lawful and plausible trial defense, a good faith self-defense against imminent unlawful excessive force. My effort to obtain justice for the violation of my rights that occurred when the enemy's hirelings attempted to murder me is currently waiting a court ruling on whether I submitted enough evidence to warrant a trial if I clear this hurdle. I expect a trial to occur sometime in late summer or early autumn. Moreover, I want to direct your attention to another malicious violation of my sacred rights by the appointed instruments of oppression. The enemy's mercenaries stole all my liberty tools without cause, being that they could not connect my liberty tools to any unlawful activity during the trial. Unbeknownst to me, the enemy initiated a civil forfeiture proceeding separate and distinct from the criminal proceedings, and my tools were forfeited to the enemy by default because I never answered the complaint. About 18 months later, I became privy to this forfeiture, thus filed a claim to reopen the proceedings. Since I was never afforded notice of the proceeding, the enemy put forward postal documents, the certified mail receipt, and the return receipt with the signature of the attorney who assisted me in the criminal trial as proof this notice was provided in accordance to the supplemental rules of forfeiture. The courts, both district and appeals, relied on these postal documents to deny my claim. Upon further investigation on my part, I discovered after mailing a copy of these postal documents, which were an exhibit in the case, to the attorney who had supposedly received and signed for the notice, only to have this attorney enlighten me to the fact that he never received such notice and that his signature on the return receipt was a forgery. I am now in the process of filing a lawsuit seeking justice for this blatant violation of my unalienable rights. Upon closer scrutiny of the postal documents, I realized the certified mail receipt was missing the circular postmark, and the return receipt was missing the processing tick marks, and the post office has no record of the certified mail number. When I reflect on how the theft of my property by the enemy has played out so far, a scripture comes to my mind. Behold, the wicked bring forth iniquity. Yes, he conceives trouble and brings forth falsehood. He made a pit and dug it out, and has fallen into the ditch which he made. His trouble shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealing shall come down on his own crown. Psalm 7. The scriptures are never wrong. Praise God for that, Daniel. I agree with that. I feel the disposition to present to my reader a candid discussion on why the national government is illegitimate, exercising our unalienable right to speak freely. The keystone to the claim I make is that the national government has unlawfully surrendered the people's sovereignty to a private foreign entity that is bent on destroying the liberty bequeathed to us by our venerable forefathers. The entity I speak of is the fountain from which all corruption and immorality flows, the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve is one of many central banks throughout the world. Like the others, each central bank takes on the likenesses of a parasite, slowly destroying its host as itself becomes stronger and more formidable. All these central banks are under the direction and control of an aristocratic cabal of international bankers who believe it is their right to dominate and enslave us. Their most potent weapon that they use against the people to dominate them are irredeemable bills of credit, also known as Federal Reserve notes, which have been foisted unto an unsuspecting public by the national government via unlawful legal tender laws. Paper money is a pestilence which inflicts nothing but destruction. If any individual would endeavor by sound circumspection and honest reflection to look at the role of the Federal Reserve plays in the national government, they will soon come to the unimpeachable conclusion that it controls the government regardless to what faction is conceivably holding a majority, and this goes for the courts as well. Metaphorically speaking, if I control your wallet or purse, meaning I control how much money goes into and out of it, don't I control your actions, your standard of living, and the means by which you survive? The enemy's bank has this control over the national government. Thus, it's the enemy's government, not the people's. To state otherwise would be a canard. The enemy's bank and government have a mutually beneficial relationship. The bankers get filthy rich by robbing their beast of burden, the people, and they maintain the lion's share of power and control over the host country. The politicians, i.e. Congress, gets to deficit spend without the public knowing it is being taxed via inflation. Let's talk about inflation for a moment. What exactly is it? It is when the quantity of money in the marketplace is increased without harmonizing increase of goods. Without a harmonizing increase in goods. The effect is a reduction in the purchasing power of each monetary unit. For example, let's consider the board game of Monopoly. There is a fixed number of items, property, railroads, etc. to purchase and a fixed amount of money in the marketplace. The money the players have plus whatever is in the bank. The banker decides to double the amount of money by placing all the money from a second unused Monopoly game into the bank of the active Monopoly game. The mathematics tells us that as this money flows into the marketplace, the prices of all the items will eventually double, reacting in direct proportion to the increase in money. The winner of such a scenario is the person who gets to spend the new money first before the effects of inflation take hold. The losers are all the people who now have to pay double because of the loss of the purchasing power of the money they hold. Seeing that only a select few can be the ones to spend the new money into the market, the losers, not knowing they have been surreptitiously robbed, try and remedy their loss by working harder and longer like a slave. The enemy's Federal Reserve is a thief that constantly is robbing the American people's labor, wealth, and purchasing power. The purchasing power that is stolen from each monetary unit doesn't vanish. It is transferred into the new money to give it life, so to speak. The national government is the first to spend the new money most of the time on things and programs to complete the enemy's system of despotism over the people's sacred rights and liberties. The people are left to cope and struggle under the never-ending theft of their purchasing power as a police state is being foisted upon them. Now, my reader should have a firm understanding why both the husband and wife have to work 50 years each per week, or why an individual has to work 2 jobs just to make ends meet, and why back in the day we had penny candy that now costs 50 cents. Listen and listen good, so you get this important fact into your psyche. If there is only one principle or fact you learn from this correspondence, let it be: inflation is tantamount to taxation without representation. Inflation is theft, plain and simple. Inflation is an inescapable direct tax on anyone who uses a Federal Reserve note, a tax that is not debated, not in law, and doesn't have to be collected. It is the master stroke of all the taxes a tyrant seeks to impose. The enemy's pensioners and placement in government tell the people that the rising cost of health care or the rising cost of this or that needs to be controlled. Therefore, a massive health care or whatever bureaucracy must be put in place when the enemy's government and central bank are the culprits that caused the cost to rise in the first place. Through their iniquitous system of inflation, Americans are lamenting the rise of cost of gasoline, not enough supply. Too much demand, lack of refining capacity. Whoever told you that deceived you. That may be a part of the reason, but you should also consider that the price of the gasoline did not just go up. The value of your money went down. 2. You've been the victim of the enemy's theft by the way of inflation. We, the people as one, are being plundered by inflation, which could not happen if our sovereignty had not been placed into subjection to a foreign power, i.e. the International Bankers' Federal Reserve System, with its paper currency. The people have been placed under a power by our trustees without our consent. Knowing such power aims to destroy us, the people's ordinance or constitution, which is supposed to limit the national government and promote Individual liberty does not grant the authority for such an absolute power to be used against us. The desire of the aristocratic cabal of internationalists is to have us in their absolute power and to be able to compel us by force if necessary, which is against our right to freedom, to make us slaves. To be free from such unlawful force is the only security to our self-preservation. Reason bids us to look at this symbiotic partnership between the government and the central bank as making them our enemy, who are conspirators of a well-orchestrated plan to take away our liberties, thereby putting themselves into a state of war with the people. To render this point perfectly self-evident, I believe an example from the pre-revolution era will suffice. After patriots had taken back John Hancock's sloop Liberty from customs and ran customs collectors out of Boston, Governor Bernard sent 2 ships to go get troops and had the beacon on Beacon Hill destroyed. A town meeting was called at Faneuil Hall in September 1768 to address the concern of the forthcoming military force, where an old man stated the following to a packed crowd as denoted in the public record: "Liberty is as precious as life. And if a man attempts to take my life, I have a right to take his. Therefore, if a man attempts to take my liberty, I have a right to take his life. Also, when the people's liberties are threatened, they are in a state of war and have a right to defend themselves." That's so powerful. Let me say it again. This is an old man speaking to a crowd pre-revolutionary time. Liberty is as precious as life, and if a man attempts to take my life, I have a right to take his. Therefore, if a man attempts to take my liberty, I have a right to take his life. Also, when the people's liberties are threatened, they are in a state of war and have a right to defend themselves. Amen to that, old man. At this same town meeting, 400 of the people's muskets were taken out of storage, were cleaned, and positioned throughout the hall. The national government's trustees have violated the trust, and once the trust has been violated, authority no longer has a right to our obedience. It is generally clear, as it is true, that we are under no moral obligation to submit to any power that aims to destroy us. The national government has dissolved itself through its own actions by delivering the people over to a foreign power, to be oppressed and plundered. As the Declaration of Independence lets us know, the people have a right to revolution. Since any government exists to nourish and ensure freedom and equality under the law, and indeed has no other higher purpose, when it is betrayed these obligations, it lost its legitimate authority and in a sense annulled itself, leaving the people free to replace it. The right to revolution, in fact, was inseparable from the instance the government was formed. Far from being an absolute or divine institution recognizing no superior authority, was in fact subordinate to certain purposes and principles, which those being governed could discern and judge for themselves. If a divergence between the acts of government and the purposes and principles of the government was originally formed for, required that the government be changed or abolished. The people do not hastily revolt, nor do they revolt over trivial violations or transient causes, and history has shown us that mankind are disposed to suffer under evil. Instead of righting it by abolishing the forms they are accustomed to, but as here the people have been forced to suffer for so long in theft of their labor and natural rights under the evident system designed for the objective to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government. By no means is our task an easy one, but be assured it is anchored on the mature and dignified taste for freedom, and not some ill-defined cause. Our cause has not contracted an alliance with the turbulent passion of anarchy, but its course is marked, on the contrary, by an attachment to whatever is lawful and orderly. With each act injurious to freedom, once it has been done and the people bear it, the repetition of such act is more likely to be met with submission, and at some future time the present submission will be pled as a precedent. I hope and believe I live in a country where the people are too intelligent and too brave to submit to tyrants. It would be beyond measure astonishing that a free people could see the miseries of such a despotic state approaching to them with large and hasty strides, and suffer themselves to be deluded by the artful insinuations of the enemy's sycophants. In the mass, media into a full persuasion that their liberties are not in danger, when in reality it has been conclusively demonstrated beyond any credible debate we are incrementally being enslaved. The government has erected its own interests separate from the governed. It has become independent of the people and is bent on enslaving them. Right now, we are being subjected to arbitrary power, theft of our labor by the way of inflation, onerous taxation, oppression, regulations, and licensing of our guaranteed rights, where the Constitution has become a dead letter, especially the Bill of Rights. The enemy's national government is in a peaceful conquest without opposition or molestation of the states of the people. Of the states and people, because we do not fight back with the necessary force. We know the enemy's government was complicit in the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, R.F. Kennedy. We know it was complicit in the Oklahoma City bombing and 9/11. We know it attacked the Weavers at Ruby Ridge, the Davidians at Waco, and the Browns at New Hampshire. These are just a few of the atrocities that let us know what the design the enemy has for every American who shall not surrender their sacred rights and liberties into the hands of the internationalist. Now, therefore, is the time when all should be united in opposition to this violation of the liberties of all. I cannot emphasize enough the vast importance of union. I ask a single question: whether my reader considers people like myself who are now suffering in the common cause, and do you sensibly feel and resent the injury and insult inflicted on us? If you do, and we cannot believe otherwise, may we not, from the approval of our former conduct in the defense of American liberty, rely on you to stop cooperating with the enemy, but instead take the fight to the enemy, as is your duty and lawful right. Your opposition to tyranny by the government must grow into a system. The events of such a glorious struggle in the common cause of liberty has often proven fatal to tyrants, who in our particular struggle need to be reminded that we reserve the fire of resistance to tyranny in our hearts. We must be united in our sentiments and opposition to the enemy's unlawful Federal Reserve System with its pernicious systematic inflation, which is the root cause that is imposing tyranny. They have encroached far too long upon our liberties, which is only getting worse. It is every American man and woman's duty to defend and restore our liberties, not only for ourselves, but also for our posterity. I advise persisting in our glorious struggle for liberty until either liberty is restored and God beholds with pleasure that just vengeance as the guilty mortals perish, or every liberty-loving American who dreads death much less than servitude perishes. I say this knowing, as it was revealed by nature, that if 999 were to perish and only 1 of 1,000 were to survive and retain liberty, one such freeman would possess more virtue and enjoy more happiness than 1,000 slaves. And let him propagate his likeness, transmit to them what he has so nobly preserved. The public's liberty must be preserved at the expense of many lives. Indeed, this will be a great sacrifice, but by comparison, where would you be if the generation of 1775, our renowned ancestors, had not laid down their lives for our liberty? Although I fear I have put your patience to the trial, I cannot withstand a strong inclination to communicate a little more on my mind to you. The honest part of mankind, the people who enrich themselves by none other than honest means, who live a virtuous lifestyle and have an inherent, unquenchable love for truth and justice, are the ones who must speak out and let our wicked enemy, with its hirelings, placemen, pensioners, jobbers, and the like, who now swarm us like locusts and caterpillars, who have prostituted the honor of their profession, prostituted the law whenever their master should require of it of them, and have prostituted their very conscience to oppress and plague the people they were bound to protect. Now they are willing to defend their unalienable rights, and if necessary, drive of like chaff their wicked underlings. We live in an important period and have a post to maintain. To desert it would be an unpardonable crime and would entail us the solemn curse of posterity. Duty and self-sacrifice is all that stands between liberty and total enslavement. Our goal is to reestablish true freedom of the individual and forever end fiat irredeemable bills of credit as currency by tossing them all into the dustbin of history, never to set foot in America ever again. The liberties of our country, the freedom contained in the Bill of Rights, are worth defending at all hazards, and it is our duty to defend them against all attacks. We have received them as fair inheritance from our worthy ancestors, who purchased them for us with great toil and danger and expense of treasure and blood, transmitted them to us with care and diligence. It would bring an everlasting mark of infamy on the present generation, enlightened as it is, if we should suffer them to be snatched from us by violence without a struggle, or be cheated out of them by the artifices of false and designing men. Let us consider our forefathers and posterity, and resolve to maintain the rights bequeathed to us from the former for the sake of the latter, instead of sitting down satisfied with the efforts we have already made, which is the wish of our enemies. The necessity of the times more than ever calls for our utmost circumspection, deliberation, fortitude, and perseverance. Let us remember that if we suffer tamely a lawless attack upon our liberties, we encourage it. Thus every such attack must be met with force, lawful force, that is. The enemy has a wicked tendency to steal my mail, and seeing the enemy vindictively has deprived me of email until May the 18th, I have no way of knowing if this correspondence made it to your hands, unless you write me back or let my brother know you received it. So please let me know. Texas Terry, I most humbly implore you to post this correspondence online, being that it will do no good collecting dust after you are done with it. I exhort you to get as many people as possible to read it. Feel free to redact what you may, even though it will sink my heart. I have written other correspondences to other patriots who posted them in an effort to prepare the public's minds. Our mutual female friend in Indiana is to link all my letters together so our fellow countrymen can be educated and enlightened. Please contact her so as many patriots as possible can read these truth grenades. This will also affect our unity and strengthen our cause for liberty. I know you are an honorable man, so I am comforted that this simple task will get done. Well, I believe I have gone a little overboard, so out of my respect for my reader, I will end it here, waiting patiently to hear you have received this. My sincere friend and fellow countrymen, I bid you an affectionate farewell. Take good care. That was written to a man who was supposed to testify at his trial. Then the attorneys of that man said, it's best that you don't testify, and then he didn't. They said if he testified, he'll become a co-conspirator. Look up the word Pusillanimous, Pusillanimous. I don't know what to say here. Daniel Riley should not be in prison. He is an incredible, articulate writer of our nation's history and what went on during the course of our country's creation. And it breaks my heart that men like him are in prison. It encourages me to stand up and to say the truth. And his attack, full-on onslaught onto fiat money systems and the Federal Reserve is right on target. The Federal Reserve is the single most evil institution in the history of mankind, and not far behind it is the CIA, FBI, Department of Justice, Bureau of Prisons, and United States government. But the single most evil one is the Federal Reserve, who funds all of these evil institutions and gives them unlimited monetary spending. I pray that you take Daniel Riley's message to heart. I pray you spread it, and I pray that this message grows like wildfire in the hearts of men across this country. Thank you for your time.